in terms of our requests, yeah.
And Nathan, you talk about money being invested into mental health care services for victims of homophobic and transphobic bullying. Can you just specifically address how important that is?
It's extremely important, and I mean, part of the discourse here has revolved around issues of violence, but I think what many people don't understand is the overwhelming majority of homophobic violence in Canada is non-physical and subtle, and not even really illegal. It has to do with smug attitudes, condescending looks, people who snicker behind your back. And when you grow up in that environment, you begin to develop layer upon layer of shame and depression. And without access to adequate health care and therapy, you can't let these things go. And so it sits inside and eats away at us, and many of us become consumed by an awful lot of anger. One of the concerns that I've heard from the right is that the gay community seems to be so into protesting all the time. But there's a reason for that. It's because people's feelings are hurt, and they're angry, and they don't know how to deal with their emotions. And so it's absolutely essential, not only for the LGBTI community, but for Canadians as a whole, that we have proper mental health care services and crisis services. I was beaten myself on a street in Regina 10 years ago. And when I called the police, they didn't seem to know how to handle the issue. The police in Regina have done a really good job of working with us, and they're improving their services all the time. I mean, certainly it didn't help me when I was 21, and some strange men just jumped out of a car and started kicking me in the face. I'm lucky, I have a good therapist, but a lot of people don't.
And what would you like to see if that sort of situation were to happen, and perhaps it does, but today as opposed to 10 years ago, or in the future, what would you like to see actually happen in situations such as that?
How should people respond to okay. Well, certainly we need proper sensitivity training for police and crisis people available to offer consolation to victims. But I really want to drive the message home here that the physical violence and attacks only represents an aspect of the problem. And what we need is proper ongoing care. We don't want to be responding to incidents all the time, because, you know, like, tough on crimes legislation will not help. We already have tough laws. And once you've already been beat up, it doesn't matter. What we need is something that will diffuse the tension in Canada in the first place before it gets to a point of violence, and that means proper services for people who are dealing with anxieties about their own sexuality, and also proper health care and mental health care for people who are dealing with anxieties around other people's sexuality, because they're often very closely linked.
Are there any other questions? Perhaps to address to Pastor Cheryl or Teresa from Campaigner Luther? No?
I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to come up.
I'm not sure if there are no questions because you think we know what we are about to say, or it's considered irrelevant. But as people who work on campus and work with the religious communities on campus, I think it's important that we give voice in support of this initiative, and to be able to say, in essence, in part what Mike said. and what Nathan said, is that there's a need for safe communities, and we live in a heterosexist society that assumes that people are straight and that you're a subset if you're not, and that subsets are always vulnerable to discrimination in various ways, and that those kind of heterosexist assumptions need to be challenged, and we need to do a lot of work to make our campus and our community safe for everyone. And I see too many students who come in because they've lived with that kind of shame and the subsequent depression and self-harming behavior. And from my perspective, we are all children of God, and we need to be treated as such, and we need to see God in one another. And that means being respectful and treating each other with dignity that we all deserve.
Catholic? Are you from Catholic faith? Can I chat with you for 2 seconds, if you don't mind? And I know, I think Mike's somewhat tackled this, but given, I mean, I guess I'm a disenfranchised Catholic. You know, given what I know about the Bible in terms of their feelings about homosexuality, I guess my question is how do you sort of reconcile that? I think the Premier Divine once said that you hate the sin, but you love the sinner. Is that? I'm just trying to get a sort of reconcile the fact that obviously you're against bullying and hostility, but given what I know about the Catholic faith in terms of their feeling about homosexuality, how do you sort of reconcile those two worlds in terms of this issue?
Well, the greatest teaching is the teaching of Jesus, that we are all created in God's image, and therefore it's an issue of justice that everyone is respected and honored no matter what. Yes, there are teachings about that everyone is to live a chaste life. That's the fundamental teaching, no matter their sexual orientation. But the greater teaching is that everyone is created in the image of God and therefore deserves to be honored and respected. And that's an issue of justice as far as I'm concerned, as far as the church is concerned.
I think that Mike Young would also like to speak to this question, if everyone's okay with that.
The question is well taken, and it's a good one, but I think the overarching point that we're trying to make is that there is room for moral and ethical disagreement about this. Whether or not there's a specific teaching that's taken one way or the other is not the issue for us today. The whole point of today is to take focus and say, we need to allow for all points of opinion and all moral and ethical challenges to any accepted view so that we can have a safe dialogue. That is kind of the whole point that I've been trying to make. And that's something that Paul talked about in Athens. He goes to the Athenians and sits down where the philosophers sat down and talked. And it says Paul went to where all the men did their thinking for the day. And that was in Athens. This is the time just after Socrates, Aristotle, Plato. And he went in and there was a multiplicity of different viewpoints that were being discussed. So when Paul was writing, Christianity was far from the accepted point of view. So I think it's important to remember that when Paul was writing, he was writing a point of view to a group of people which ultimately transformed the minds of, 3 billion Christians in the world? So I think we have to keep in mind that Christianity started in a society that allowed for dialogue, and that's what allowed us to flourish. And I think that we would be remiss not to give the same opportunity to other people.
If there are no more questions, I think that we can call this conference to a close. Please take a press package if you're a member of the press, and give a special look at the section taken from the book Pink Blood, which details acts of violence against homosexuals in Canada. It's pretty scary and pretty informative. So thanks so much for coming, and can we have a final round of applause for all of our panel members?